He's introduced you to great coffee.
Congratulations! World's best cup of coffee.
Great music.
Good win in a wrestling match. Lemmy or God?
Lemmy. God. Wrong, Dick. Trick question. Lemmy is God.
Great travel.
That's the dream. It's not the destination, it's the journey.
All things to enrich your life.
If you're good at what you do, people will recognize that.
Now, he's ready to tackle life itself.
Whoop-de-doo! What does it all mean?
With some great guests with even better life stories. Yes, even better than how he almost failed grades 2, 4, and 7.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
You're listening to the Brenton on Tour Lifecast. Here's BD.
2019, I decided to tour completely sober in a touring world that does not allow you to be sober. So I thought I would give it the real college try and do a whole year of touring completely sober. And I stumbled upon this amazing book called The Sober Diaries about a month into my journey at Heathrow Airport. And I started reading the book and started reading a bit about the author and reached out to that author and said, listen, I've just started my journey and your book has been really great to read. You know, I got about a month in, I kept following along, and she wrote me back. And I thought, wait a minute, this is really cool. This is somebody who's giving me a bit of access to what she went through. And it changed my journey right at that moment to follow along her journey and to see if they correlated. And she made the time to come see me today. Clare Pooley,
Hi.
Welcome to the first episode of the Lifecast.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here and to meet you in person after all this time, because we've been sort of corresponding for a few months now, and it's great to be here. So thank you.
I started the journey for nothing more than the fact that I thought maybe I needed to give it, a real try. I needed to try to go on tour and see if I could do it without a single drink in the course of a year. And your book came, there's so many books. There's loads of books, how to stop drinking and how to do this and how to do that. And I found a lot of them very, I don't want to say dull, but it just was really hard to wrap my head around the process. And your process made it so easy because of what you created here and how you wrote the book and how you sort of made it flow. It helped me go along my journey because you put your day numbers in. Day 40, day this and day that, and I would coincide. So take me to this spot, because for our listeners that are just learning about you, it started with this amazing blog, and here we are. You've got this amazing book.
Yeah, I mean, my story is very similar to a lot of people who find that they end up in having a problem with alcohol, and that it just sort of crept up on me. I used to drink a glass of wine at the end of the day to relax, and it's like me time, and it was my way of chilling out, and and that glass of wine turned into 2 glasses of wine, which turned into 3 glasses of wine, and before long I was drinking a bottle a day and more at weekends. So I was drinking about 10 bottles of wine a week, which is way too much, obviously. And it started to have a really bad impact on my life. And, I think at that point I felt really lonely, because I thought I didn't know anybody else like me. The image I had of people who had alcohol problems was very different from the image I had of myself. And, I felt like I was the only person who couldn't cope with alcohol in the way that normal people could, and I was made to feel like I wasn't normal, and as a result, I started writing a blog, and I started writing it to sort of get my head around what I was going through, and I called the blog "Mummy Was a Secret Drinker," and I started it the day I stopped drinking, and it was my therapy. So I wrote every single day, and I wrote what was going on in my life, and I never publicized it, but more and more people found it. And, within a year, actually, I'd had nearly 1 million hits on the blog without any publicity. And what I discovered is that, we're all very different. We come from different places. We are different ages. We have different backgrounds. And yet people, when they quit drinking, go through such a similar experience. And and so when I started sharing my story, I had people all over the world saying, God, I feel exactly the same, and just the same thing happened to me. And, and we, as a result, all of us felt much less alone. And I guess that's why I published the book, because I didn't want anyone else to feel like I did when I first quit drinking. I didn't want anyone else to feel that lonely. I didn't want anyone else to feel that different or that abnormal. I wanted them to realize that, there are millions of us out there that can't cope with alcohol, because alcohol is a toxin, it's an addictive drug, and, if you get in trouble with it, it's not your fault, it's the fault of the drug. And that's what I wanted people to understand. But I guess the other thing I really wanted to do is to make it upbeat and to make it fun, because, everything I'd read about alcohol was all doom and gloom. It was like, this is going to be so hard and so miserable. And sometimes it is hard, but, the best way of getting through it is to make it not miserable, is to, it's actually the most transformative thing you can do with your life is to quit drinking. It's a really positive and a phenomenal thing to do. So I wanted a book that was upbeat and was funny. And
it certainly is, and it made me laugh, and especially as you adjusted to going to dinner parties and things. Because one of the things you touch on is how you're more likely to be given a glass of wine at a play date, right? Than juice or water or something, because it's just the most common thing. And the biggest thing that I found through this journey, especially being on tour, the first thing people say to you is, "What? What are you talking about?" And why? Or did you have a problem, or did you have this? And I guess, did I have a problem? I'm not sure I can answer that. Did I foresee a problem? Potentially. Did I drink a lot the year before? 100%. So while I'm going through trying to be as responsible as possible and be a good dad and a husband and all the rest of it, this kind of creeps in and becomes a bit of a normal end of the day. Get on the bus, have a couple of doubles, have a whatever, go to sleep. And people can't wrap their head around when you want to stop doing that. And you make it fun in the book, how you counter it.
It's funny, isn't it? Because, you give up smoking and everyone treats you like a hero, and you give up alcohol and people think you're a bit crazy. And, something I talk about in the book is alcohol is the only drug that you have to justify not taking. And, it's crazy because any other, you can give up gluten or dairy and people go, oh, that's cool, but you give up alcohol and they go, why? And I think it's because it makes people question their own behavior, and nobody likes having to do that.
It does that. I'm finding a bit of that. People, I could never do that, or how do you do it, or just the journey of day one, because there's Sober October and there's January now. People aren't drinking. Okay, I'm drinking. People plan it out. They plan out I'm going to go. Well, I can't stop drinking on the 20th of December because we've got Trevor and Marie's party on the 21st. Oh, and then we've got to go.
Yeah, I did that stuff for years.
Right. Then we've got to go to and then my husband's family's having dinner, and that's always good for 4 bottles. We plan. I was part of it. It's like, well, people literally. I feel like Sober October or January. It's been created, and now people go, well, okay, I got to get all my drinking in September because then I'm going to be sober in October. But there's these little things, and that day one hurdle seems to be easy because a lot of people, after they've been drunk for 2 or 3 days, don't want to drink for a couple of days. So then okay, it's a week, and then it's 2 weeks. I started with 3 months. And then I'm like, well, I'm at 90 days, so 100's right there. Oh, there's 125. Well, 150 is just around the corner. So just it kind of went like that. And reading along your book as you were kind of describing what you were going through on this day and that day and all the rest of it.
This, I think, is part of the problem with so dry January and sober October, because the first month is the hardest, but it's also the one where you get the fewest results, because actually you find that it's about 100 days when the really good things start kicking in, and that's also when it gets easier. So if you've quit drinking just for a month, you've gone through the hardest bit without getting any of the really good bits. So, you're bound to think, oh, that's a bit miserable, I better start drinking again. Actually, what you really want to do is give it 100 days and then see how you feel.
And that's where it was. It was 100 days for me, and I was like, well, I feel really great. The detachment of a good time. This, for me, is the thing that I think people struggle the most with, because as long as we've been kids, our parents had, we were going out, wherever we were going out, parents were like, oh, got to get some wine, or we got to do, and for me, I can think back to like every single thing from as long as I can remember was attached to alcohol. It was attached to, like, I'm just saying, Christmas parties, the neighbors building a shed and they're all drinking beer, ice
yes,
fizz,
it's
whatever it's
totally
going to be.
Hardwired into our self-conscious.
It's hardwired into our system that that you need it for a good time, and that is the hardest thing to break, especially on tour, because when you're on tour with people, half the time this is how you're getting to know people. You can come into the first show and not meet anybody until you get on the bus after that first show, and everyone's like, okay, what's your name, how are you, what's your job, cool, what are you drinking? Sparkling, I'll take a Pellegrino and lime. Okay. And then day 2, it's like, I'll take 2 Pellegrinos and lime. And then you start getting the separation of, like, what the bus starts separating into the people who drink and the people who don't. And that's like life as well. I've got people that I've told about it, and it can make people a bit uncomfortable.
It can, and it's a shame, because I think I have some friends who were our friendship was based on doing a lot of drinking together, and those friendships have been difficult since I quit. But I found that the friends I do have are my friendships are much deeper, because actually, drinking makes you quite, or it certainly did with me, it made me quite selfish. I was always on transmit, I was always I'd yabber away and I wouldn't really listen to anything anybody said. And then if they did say interesting stuff, I couldn't remember it the next day anyway. And I'm not sure that, I never really paid attention. And now I don't drink. I listen properly. I have really proper, deep conversations with people. I remember them the next day. I remember the important stuff. I'm really, I'm a much better friend. So, and actually I've made friends with a much wider group of people than I was ever friends with before, because I used to pick my friends partly just on their stamina and how, whether they were as big a drinker as I was. Whereas now I pick friends for all sorts of reasons, and my friends are much more wide-ranging and eclectic and interesting.
And there's one thing that is going on in the world right now is that, everyone's got a voice, or everyone's got something to talk about, or everyone's got, it's not as, it's easy to find people that don't drink. It's easy to find sober people everywhere. On tour, I'm finding it's starting to become a lot easier. People are traveling. A lot of bands are better at it now. A lot of more bands are sober now, which is filtering down to the crew. And so things are changing a little bit on that side of it. So I am finding it a little bit easier. How far are you into your journey? How long have you been sober for now?
So it's coming up for 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah. And I have to say that, it's funny, the first year of not drinking is you do a lot of looking internally. You do a lot of trying to work out why you were drinking, what's who you are without the drink, what you can. You're left with a bit of a hole that you have to fill, and you try and work out what to fill that hole with. So you do a lot of thinking and a lot of sort of agonizing. And I'm so excited about for you, because you're coming up for like year 2, is the second year is when you really, I think your life really starts changing, because, you've suddenly, you're in a position where you've got, loads more energy, loads more time, you're much, by then, you've been through all that angst and sort of, self-analysis, and you feel much stronger and much more aware of who you are. And people in their second year sober often do the most extraordinary things. I mean, it's like you and your podcast, and for me it was writing. So, I first published the Sober Diaries, and now I've written a novel, which is something I've always wanted to do. But, I never got round to it, and I was always too scared. And that's the other thing, you quit drinking and you think, God, if I can do that, if I can cope with all these things, if I can tour with a band for a year without drinking, I can do anything. It turns you into a superhero. So you forget your fear. So all the fears I had about rejection and not being able to get published and wasting my time and all, I thought, fuck it. I might as well just go for it and see what happens. So
the podcast was a product of trying to be creative out here. Like I needed some kind of creative outlet. I'm sure that happened to you. So the day you stopped, back to your blog for 1 minute, you just started writing it, and then you just published it on like a
Blogger.
What was it called? On
Blogger, yeah.
So you just, did you categorize it? Like you didn't publicize it, but did you write like self-help, alcohol, so people could find it?
Yeah, and most people, because I was anonymous, so I called myself Sober Mummy, and I was really worried about anyone who knew me finding it. So I couldn't publicize it on social media or anything like most people do with their blogs. So it was literally, I was found by people typing into Google, am I an alcoholic? Am I drinking too much? How to stop drinking? And, and I gradually went up the Google search engine, because more and more people found me that way. So
because you see the growth. Like I liken to putting a podcast out, to releasing an album every week. That's how I feel right now, because no one knows me. I'm just some schmuck on tour, but it's been building, and it's been a lot of fun. And obviously it starts with your first listener. And, there's somebody listening, right? There's somebody reading.
I remember the first time somebody, I saw a page view come up on my blog. Ooh. I was like, yay, somebody's reading. And then it was me.
Well, I probably have at least 20 of my own listens. Yeah, sure. Because, I rarely listen back to them. It's fun. I'm trying to grow with it. So if you can already tell, I'm no journalist. I'm just trying to build something, and I'm trying to educate people as we move through this thing, and it's given me an opportunity to be creative. This has been the best part of the journey, because now I'm obviously clean-headed, and I'm not hazy and all the rest of it. And your days off are now filled with the first modules that I was doing on the podcast were about coffee and trying to find the best coffee in the world. And then I switched to music, and then I switched to travel, and here we are on life. And it gives me now purpose to design these things out and give me something to do on these days off, where it used to be, what are we doing? What time are we going to the bar? Okay, we're just staying at the hotel bar. We're doing this. Now it's like, I can go to a bar, but I'd rather go to an obscure coffee shop in the middle of the Scottish Highlands and find out how they get their coffee and where they do it. And that's...
Yeah, it's funny, because when you drink a lot, when drinking is your thing, you become very lazy about what you do with your time, because the shortcut is always, we'll have a few drinks. And when you quit drinking, you have to find different ways of getting out of your head, different ways of relaxing, of having fun, So since I quit, I've been, I'm much more inventive about how I spend my free time. So I go to the theatre a huge amount, which I stopped doing. I do art galleries. I do, I do expeditions. I do all sorts of things that I'd stopped doing because, it was just easier just to go to a bar. So, it makes your life much broader and much richer. And coming back to your thing about creativity, creativity and addiction are really linked in many ways. So, I sort of think creative people often have very active brains. You're you constantly have stuff going around in your head, and that can be really exhausting. And we often drink because it's a way of numbing those, numbing all that stuff. And when you quit drinking, you need to find other ways of making your brain go still. And people talk about, meditation and mindfulness. I don't know about you, I found meditation really hard.
I haven't tried it yet, but I listen to a lot of Howard Stern, and he's done it, and all these other people come on there and they talk about it. I haven't quite got there yet.
It's tricky, but you know what? Doing something creative does the same thing. It helps your mind still, and it stops all those thoughts going loopy. And it's sort of, it's a form of mindfulness that is sort of, much easier and much more productive than just trying to meditate. So I find people either write or they paint or, they listen to music. Music is a fabulous way of getting the same sort of dopamine hit that you used to get from alcohol.
Describe the dopamine side of it to people that aren't aware.
Yeah, see, when I quit drinking, I did a whole load of research into why it was I got into this situation, and a lot of it is down to the dopamine. So the reason we drink is because when you drink, your brain releases dopamine, and dopamine makes you feel good, and so then your brain thinks, oh, that was nice, I'd like some more of that. So your subconscious tells you to have another drink, and the problem is that when you drink quite a lot over a long period of time, your brain stops making dopamine by itself because it gets the dopamine hit sort of every time you drink. So it reduces the amount of dopamine that it produces naturally. So that means that you feel rather down and depressed when you're not drinking because your brain's not producing dopamine anymore, which is why they say alcohol is a depressant. And the only way you feel happy again is when you drink. So you think, oh, alcohol is the only thing that's making me happy. Actually, alcohol was the thing that made you sad in the first place. So you're only trying to fix a problem that the alcohol created. So when you quit drinking, your brain takes a while to readjust, but eventually it starts making that dopamine again by itself. So you end up feeling sort of much more positive about life in general.
Can you pull that dopamine from, I guess, maybe from the gym or from music, or I guess
there's a
finds
number
new
of ways you can
reprogram.
get a dopamine hit which are much more healthy than drinking. I mean, actually, the easy way is sugar, so cake, and so a lot of people when they quit drinking start eating sweet stuff. Obviously, that's not a great thing to do all the time, but once in a while, hell, who cares? But yeah, exercise is gives you a dopamine hit. Sex, obviously, coffee, and music, dancing, sort of form anything creative has the same.
I'm
impact.
finding that's what's happening with me. I mean, the gym a lot more, but the creativity is like I want to find new ways to create, and put some stuff out there. And again, I'm not as concerned with people knowing who I am. What I want to do is create product that is educating, or at least create something that's like an interesting journey for the listener and watcher, because I've got the YouTube channel now as well. So it's one of those things where I want people to learn something from it, and that has been giving me quite the rush. Over Christmas, I had people messaging me, I want to, buy my husband this coffee maker. Strangers that were listening to the podcast. And what do you think of this? And people asking me my advice on it, which was, what? It was just the funniest thing. And then on the music side of things, I actually had some pretty heavy episodes of people dealing with cancer, which you had to go through, obviously, and some loss of people that in our music industry that really affected people. And I actually had people reaching out to me that had to pull their car over weeping. Oh. And I was like, I don't know how to respond to that outside of the fact that I guess I've created something that touched somebody in some capacity. So it did give me a bit of a, I have to keep doing this then. I have to keep creating.
You know what? So much of social media is about people showing perfect lives that aren't real and that just make everyone else feel a bit more miserable. Because we look at other people's Instagram feeds and Facebook feeds and we think, why isn't our life like that? Why isn't everything so perfect? So I think doing something like you do, where actually, you interview people about the tough sides of life, and the things that aren't easy and aren't perfect, are really helpful, because it makes people realize that, everyone has bad stuff going on in their lives, and we're all just muddling along and trying to cope. And, and actually, it's not like an Instagram feed. That's not real life.
No, and I want to keep the episodes relatively light, but I also, sometimes you just meet people that have that need to, we need to have a serious discussion. And a lot of people can gravitate to it. I know that I love a good, funny comedy episode of some things. And I also like to settle in and learn a bit about people along the way. So you had to go through this journey of sobriety while you obviously had to go through a bit of a cancer scare as well, and you had to come through that with your family and everything, and you touched in the book about coming through that, and I think that could also drive people to drink, and you have moved the other way and said, no, you need to be as strong as possible to go through something like that.
Yeah, you know what, I mean, I always assumed that if something really good happened, you drank. And if something really bad happened, you drank.
You drank more. You drank more. Yeah.
And I always assumed that, if I hit a crisis point in life, I would use alcohol as a way of getting through it. And I quit drinking for 8 months when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And luckily, I still get, every time I talk about this, I try and do it without getting sort of all choked up, and I find it almost impossible. I am so grateful every single day that I had stopped drinking before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, because if I had been drinking at that point, the wheels would have fallen off the wagon, because I had 3 small kids. So my youngest at the time was 6. They were 6, 8, and 11, and they needed to know that their mother was going to be okay. Yeah. And I didn't know whether I was going to be okay.
But you got to put it up.
And if I'd been drinking, I would have wept in front of them. Right. I would have been, I would have been drinking every night. I would have been hungover every morning. I would have been a mess. And as it was, I was able to put them first. I was able to, what I used to do is, when things got really tough, I would just go take the dog for a walk, and I'd go and weep in the park. And then I'd come back and I'd smile, and everything would be fine. And, and I got through the whole thing, and, and I came out a stronger, more empathetic person than I'd gone in. And, and I couldn't have done that if I'd been drinking. And
I'm sure that obviously that story would have helped millions of people that were already reading, and you had brought them on this journey, and you talk about it in the book. So it's something that, people can take out of these things what they want. They can take the book and they can take it for what it is, or they can be like, oh, that's, stop telling me what to do, or whatever. There's nothing preachy about this book. This book for me was a guide, almost to a funny guide, one of the cool things that I need to tell was that I almost caved in Cork, Ireland, as you do. I was on Whiskey Alley. I was alone. The tour, I just was in this weird zone where I'm like, I think I'm going to cave. I'm going to cave. And it wasn't even like caving the way you see in the movies or something, he caved and he's off to rehab. I was just like, no, I'm so many days into this journey that to have something right now would, the idea of starting back over at day number 1, because that scared the shit out of me. And I was like, so I go to your book and I'm like, what day am I at? Or I looked at the day number and I looked at your book and I was like, this was the time that you had caved, almost the exact same day. I couldn't believe it. And I reached out to you and said, wow, I had to reference this book, and you messaged me back. To me, that was one of the coolest things that you could have done, because I'm just the guy from Canada that's, on tour, trying to sort through this thing, with the support of my family and a little bit of support on tour with some people. But when you're the author of the book that you're reading messages you back and says, no, you got this, you're gonna do it. it was the most important part of my journey.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
At that point, because it was, I went for a run, I went to the gym, and then I plowed through. That was the most important part, because our days matched. I couldn't believe it. And I'd have to reference back what day that was, but our days matched.
That sort of time is tricky, because, you get to the point where you think, okay, I've done this for months now. I'm quite good at this, and it's quite easy. And you think so, and your brain goes through this sort of thought process, and everybody does this. You start thinking, okay, so now I've reset, and I can start again, and I can be much more sensible this time because I've learnt my lesson, and I'm only going to have one, and that's it. And then I won't have another one until maybe my birthday or maybe Christmas, and I'll just have one then. And so you have one, and then you think, see, I did it. And then the next week you have two, and the week after that you have three, and within a month you are back to where you were before and more. And, and I did that on repeat for, several years. I'd give up for a bit, and then I would go through that thought process, and I think, okay, now I know I've learned my lesson. And the truth is, there are two sorts of people. There are people who are good at moderating stuff, and there are people who are all or nothing. And what I've learned through that whole process is that I'm just an all or nothing person. And I'm like that about everything. I'm like that about chocolate. I'm like that about crisps or chips, I think you call them in Canada.
Yeah.
So, and once you realize that, actually it makes it so much easier, because then you just think, okay, I'm better off just not having anything. It's just easier for me than trying to keep a lid on it the whole time.
And that's I think that the part of it is just discovering what kind of person you are. So that's part of it. So maybe year 2 for me, I'll discover a different part of me. I'm not sure, but I know that I was certainly a bit fearful coming up, because I started January 1st, and I was certainly fearful about coming across the new year, and I'm like, okay, well, I've accomplished 1 year. So do I say, okay, cool, I made it a year, and then I'll start again, and I'll be fine, I'll be able to moderate it? Or no, I'm going to, at this point, I'm still working through like months. I made it through a year. Now we're into 3 months into the new year, and I'm doing, I'm still there. So it's
you
good.
know what's funny as well is that you start off and you count the hours, and then you start counting days, and then you start counting months eventually.
Yeah.
It takes a while before you move on to months. And, I get the point now, you said to me earlier, you said, how long has it been since you quit drinking? And I had to think really hard. I was like, is it 4 years or is it 5 years? I can't even remember the years, let alone the months.
So you're in a different space, which is amazing.
So it does become the new normal. It just takes a while. When you've spent decades drinking, and you've trained your subconscious ever since you were a child, as you were saying at the beginning, to sort of associate alcohol with all these things. It just takes a while to reprogram, but it does become the new normal. And I feel the same. I gave up smoking 15 years ago, and now I wouldn't dream of having a cigarette. Right. If you told me I was going to be run over by a bus tomorrow, I wouldn't light up a cigarette. Why would I? And I feel like that about drinking now. It just takes a while.
It takes a while. I feel like I'm over the cusp. I don't worry. But it was funny. I took a bunch of people on the last tour to the Jameson plant in Dublin, because they're just great people, and the Jameson people are awesome. And one of the drinks that they have there is a Jameson and ginger. So I ordered a ginger ale and lime, and they accidentally put Jameson in it. And it touched my lips, and I knew right away because it would actually burnt my lips, which maybe I lost all my sensation when I was drinking, because I was like, nope, there's alcohol in there, and I had to push it away. And I was fighting with the idea of like, oh man, does that mean
that wouldn't have been my fault? I could have just drank it.
Right. I'm like, do I start back at day 1 now because it touched my lips? So I went a little bit easy. I'll let you. I know you got to run, so a couple of things I want to touch on. So. The best thing that's happened since the release of the book to you. So the blog, and then the book, and then so where are you at now? What's the best thing that's happened in your life since the blog became so huge, and the Sober Diaries sold so much, and you're in this different world now? What's the best thing? Back to Clare in a second. Just going to take a quick break. My friends at partakebrewing.ca jumped on board to sponsor the Lifecast. They got a non-alcoholic beer. It's the best I've had. They got a pale, they got an IPA, they got a stout, they got a red, they got a blonde, keto-friendly, vegan, They taste as close of a beer as I've had yet. Really great. Jumped on board. Perfect for this conversation. Claire and I, obviously, not drinking anymore, but Claire writing the Sober Diaries, which has blown up and done some amazing business. So check them out, partakebrewing.ca. How has Claire's life changed? We're going to get to it. Make sure you stick around at the end of the interview, because Claire called me yesterday and we did another Zoom for about another 10 minutes to give a little bit of an update on her world and her life since the release of the book, what's happening in the UK, all of it. So very awesome stuff. Thanks for listening to this week. And back to my interview with Claire. What has changed for her?
I think for me, the best thing is hearing stories like yours. You know, I still get messages every day from people who say that, you know, their lives have changed since they found my blog or found my book. And, you know, that's a great thing to be able to do. And, you know, I'm sort of, it's funny, Alcoholics Anonymous, I never did AA. I was too scared to do AA, I think, and I sort of, you know, I never went. But one thing that they talk about is giving back. You know, the final step in the 12 steps is giving back. And, you know, I think it's great to feel like, you know, you're able to help other people who are in the same boat that you were in. And it's introduced me to some incredible people too, like you. You know, you and I would never have met, and we live on opposite sides of the world. You know, we do different things, you know, but, you know, here we are sitting, you know, chatting in London, you know, at the O2, and, you know, it's a great privilege to have met you, and that would never have happened.
Well, likewise, it's certainly, I mean, this book, I have to tell everybody, whether you are beginning your journey, halfway through your journey, or you just need something really great to read, whether you're still drinking and you're handling it and you're just out, you know, living life, it's a fabulous read. It's so funny. You. And it's great, and it just made me laugh, and it also got me to a really great spot, because seeing where your kids helped you through it, and then where they finally were like, you know, got you back, as you referred to it as.
Yeah, I'm a much better mum now,
you know,
than
and
I
all
was
that
then.
stuff. It was really something, and so then that led to a fiction book that you decided to write.
Yeah,
and it's out now. How did that come together, and what's it about?
Well, it was really inspired by what happened to me, because I thought, God, if, you know, telling the truth about my life changed not only my own life, but the lives of a whole load of other people. And it got me thinking, what would happen if other people told the truth about their lives? So that's where the idea for the Authenticity Project came out. You know, it was the idea of a notebook, which an old man, an artist, wrote in, and he wrote, everyone lies about their lives, and what would happen if you told the truth instead? And then he tells the truth about his life and leaves the book in a cafe, and the cafe owner picks it up, reads his story, and decides to track him down and help change his life. And she writes her story, and leaves it somewhere where it's picked up by an addict, funnily enough, a coke addict called Hazard. And he reads her story and then writes his own, and so on. So it's passed between 6 people, and they all meet each other, and they all change each other's lives in different ways. So it's a book about the power of being authentic, and about the power of telling your story, and about how communities can come together and help each other. So it's very much based on my own.
Was it a harder book to write than the Sober Diaries? Because one, you can just start pulling pages out of your life. This one, you have to kind of create a brand new story, but you already have that story built, kind of? Or was it harder to write fiction?
It's harder and easier. I mean, it's easier in that you can, you know, you're not tied to reality, you know, so you can make whatever happen that you want to happen. But it's also harder because it's not tied to reality. You have to, you know, you have to imagine those things. But it's a great, you know, again, it's creativity. You know, I'd always wanted to write. I'd wanted to write since I was a child, and it was only when I stopped drinking that I found that urge to write again. And the minute I stopped drinking, I started writing, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote, and I haven't stopped.
Well, now that's the thing, right? Now I'm sure you're exploding with ideas on what to write next and all the rest of it. And it never ends now. I mean, now that you've laid the platform out, and you've pulled people like myself in that randomly found you and now are hooked, and I'm telling everybody about it. I mean, pretty much everything you write now, you're going to have us standing by for what's next. So, and I couldn't be more excited to be along for the ride and have you here with me for this.
Oh, thank you.
It's time for rapid fire. So, life is the last module of podcasts of this series. I started with, as I said, coffee, took people on my coffee journey around the world, music, a bit of a musical journey around the world, travel, how to travel the best you can be, how not to be a travel asshole, how to be efficient at that. And life is going to culminate all of those and hopefully teach people some lessons and take what they've learned from these other modules and move on. So I'm going to hit you with a couple of things. One-word answers, if you can, about, here we go. Your favorite coffee shop in London?
There's a great coffee shop in Soho, and I've forgotten the name. It's really famous. And I can't remember what it's called because you've put me on the spot.
That's right. That's all good. But you touch on your favorite barista. You have a barista that you love.
Yes. No, he's retired. It's so sad. But,
you have to find a new one.
Yeah, I do. I need a new barista because it makes such a difference. Even within one coffee shop, who's making the coffee makes such a difference. So yeah, he was at the Craven Cottage coffee shop, which is attached to Fulham Football Club. Yeah.
Well, we'll go with that one.
Okay.
We'll go with that coffee shop. Favorite music to listen to?
Now that is almost impossible because it so depends on your mood.
Right.
So,
what's your go-to that is almost on every single day?
I would say I'm a big Queen fan. Freddie Mercury is one of my all-time favorite people. And
you're coming to see him? You're not him, but you're
coming
to see Queen.
I'm coming to see Queen with Adam Lambert.
Have you seen them before?
No.
First time?
And, I've got the kids all into it. I took them to see the film Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
So now they're big Queen fans too. So I'm taking the whole family to see Queen.
Favorite place to travel in the world?
I spend a lot of time in Thailand, which is also features in my novel. So I spent a wonderful month on a pretty much sort of deserted island in Thailand back in the late 80s. And if you read the Authenticity Project, you'll see Hazard ends up on this island, which is absolutely based on that experience. So that's one of my favorite places.
And as we close with life, given the journey that you've been on thus far, you've come through 5 years of sobriety, wrote this great blog, 2 books now, back to being a mommy, doing all this stuff, and things are really rolling along for you. What's the best advice in life that you can give to somebody, whether they're struggling with alcohol or whether they're just struggling in life? What's sort of your mantra? What do you kind of try to live by?
You know what? I think one of the most important things is dealing with fear. I think so many of us are held back by fear, and part of the reason I drank was to numb anxiety. And I think if you can realize that fear is your friend, and that actually, getting onto the other side of your fear is where all the most exciting things happen in life. If you're feeling fearful about something, it's probably because it's something amazing is going to happen. So feel the fear and do it anyway.
I've always lived by the thing that all the great things in life have happened because I said yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And whether it works out or doesn't work out, at least you went for it.
Even this morning, I woke up and I thought, I've got so much to do today. And I thought, the O2 is like an hour away from me. It's the other side of London. And I'm a bit nervous about meeting somebody I've never met before. Sure. And, maybe I should just cancel. And I thought, no, I'm so pleased I didn't.
And I am too, because you've been a huge part of my journey this past year. And I'm pretty confident I wouldn't have been able to do it without you, because just strictly finding the book and being able to read what you had to go through was inspiration enough. I started a podcast based on the idea that you started writing and doing some stuff. It helped me be creative, and I used a lot of that guidance. But most importantly, you stayed in touch. You didn't have to. You reached out to me, or I reached out to you, and you came back to me, first saying thanks for reading the book and all the rest of it. And then when I started getting a little bit more personal about maybe caving or going through it, you were right there, telling me, I got this. And as I said, and I touched on before, it was the most important part of this journey. It's a never-ending one. It'll keep going, but I feel like you've built some really great tools for me. The fact that you came all the way to see me today, I'll never forget. And
I won't forget this either.
I want the listeners to not forget, because this was a big moment for me. And I want you guys listening to understand that, like, this started as a podcast of me trying to be creative. But the access that we have to people around the world that want to give us access back is unbelievable. And you made time for me, and it's turned into a big part of my life. Here you are sitting on the couch, and we're backstage at the O2 in London, which is one of my favorite arenas. I've done 10 shows here, and it just seems like a really great natural way to start the Lifecast with somebody that's given me so much life this year. And I can't thank you enough.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And this next year for you is going to be amazing. I know it is.
Well, hopefully we can reconvene sometime this year and catch up again, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. The Authenticity Project is available now all over the world.
Yeah, in 29 different languages, amazingly.
Did you have to narrate 29 different languages?
No. Thank goodness.
Make sure you pick it up. Please, my friends, make sure you pick up the Sober Diaries, for nothing else, just to have a great laugh and read a wonderful journey from a wonderful woman who's done amazing things for people around the world. So, Claire, thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been so good to meet you.
All the best for 2020 and beyond.
And you.
Okay. Take care. Bye. Hey, everybody. It's Brent with the Brenton on Tour podcast, the Lifecast. Obviously, you've just listened to this great interview that I did with Clare Pooley. We did that interview, though, at the end of 2019 in December, backstage at the O2 Arena. And then the world shut down. And I had a full plan to release that interview in April as the launch of the Lifecast. And as life happens, it kind of pushes things to the side. And I had to reach out to my friend Claire here and say, hey, I probably should update the world on what you've been up to, because you made a big announcement today on your Twitter, and the book has since come out. So there's a few things to discuss. So welcome back, even though you just listened to her. Welcome back, Clare Pooley, to the Lifecast, episode 2. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's so good to see you again, even if it's virtual this time. And yeah, what a time the world has had since we last met. I mean, I remember, talking to you thinking, God, 2020 is going to be such an exciting year. And it certainly has been a year, but not in the way we expected it to be.
Well, you were going to go see Queen. You had a whole thing planned.
Yeah. And I was booked to see Elton John. I was going to all sorts of literary festivals. I had loads of bookshop events, all sorts of things in the pipeline. All of them were cancelled, but that's the case with all of us. I think we've all lost a lot this year. And I hope that along the way we've gained some things too. But it's not one that any of us are going to want to repeat.
Well, people have definitely had to adjust in life. They're getting more family time, myself included, who, I've been home the longest I've ever been in this whole career touring around. But we definitely touched on the release of your book, which I've got here in Canada, available in Canada, everywhere, the amazing Authenticity Project. And that was book number 2. We met briefly over Twitter and some of these other things during my reading of the Sober Diaries, which you were so politely to, stay in touch with me during my journey. And when we chatted, I was coming up on 1 year of not drinking. And since I'm already into September, it's already almost 2 years now since that point. But you had an announcement on Twitter today about the Sober Diaries.
Yeah, no, I've just found out from my publisher that it sold over 100,000 copies, actually over 115,000 copies now. So it's just
Worldwide, or
great
just in the
to know
UK, or
that.
all over the place?
Well, that's the English version. So that's the copy that sold in the UK, America, and Canada. I mean, it sold more in other languages as well, but
Yeah.
but I don't know the numbers. But it's just great to know that, you know, that story has found so many people around the world, and that so many people have associated with it. So yeah, that was nice to hear.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful book, and I recommend it to everybody that's maybe possibly starting the journey to remove alcohol from their life, making a change. It certainly helped me. It was an amazing read. You can follow along the days, which I found really great. And congratulations to you. You sold. Artists make records and they put them out and they sell millions or 100,000 and they get awards and all this stuff. So 100,000 is quite an achievement. So you must be very excited about that.
Yeah, I did ask my publisher where the gold disc was.
Sure.
I haven't had it yet.
Did they send you like a gold book? What is that?
I don't know. I hope so. It would be nice.
And so how is the reception of the Authenticity Project going? Like, how's that been going for you? What kind of feedback have you been getting since the book's been out?
Oh, it's been great, actually. I mean, I thank you to all my Canadian readers, because actually it made the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail bestseller lists, which was great. So it's a Canadian bestseller, and you know, it came out in the UK after lockdown, so it came out after all the bookshops had closed, which was, which was not what I was expecting, and rather sad, but. What's been amazing is I've had it sold incredibly well on ebook, and I've had messages again from people everywhere saying that, at a time when things have been really miserable, and everyone's been having such a hard time, that book has made them feel happier. It's a real sort of it's a very feel good book, sort of much like watching a Richard Curtis movie. And I think it's helped people. So I wonder, it almost feels as if that timing was meant to be, and that bringing out that book at this time was the right thing to do, even though it seems counterintuitive.
And people would have had to scramble to get it. I was able to find it at a bookstore once they opened up again. We have a chain here that was open relatively soon, but I'd imagine it would have pushed people digitally. So your publisher must be just as happy with that, getting those digital reads up as well, I would think, at least getting it out there in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said, it sold really well on ebook, and hopefully when the paperback version comes out, because in most markets it launched first in hardback, and when the paperback version comes out, I hope that the bookshops will be open and I'll get to sort of see it everywhere. But yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, in Canada, you can pretty much, I think, pick it up anywhere. I've seen it in Canada. We have a chain called Shoppers Drug Mart. I've seen it there. London Drugs, I've seen it at Indigo and all those places. So it's
brilliant.
out there. And I believe I also saw it at Costco.
Yeah, it was definitely in Costco at the beginning. I don't know if
so I'm sure that would have sold a bunch. So congrats. That's book number 2. Any designs on book number 3?
Oh God, don't ask. I'm in the middle of editing at the moment, and it's they talk about the painful second album.
Right.
The same is true of painful second books, I think. So I'm trying to wrestle it into shape, and fingers crossed, I'll keep you posted.
Amazing. Can't wait. I encourage everybody to check out both of Claire's books so far. They've been very inspiring and fun reads, and it gives you a good insight into the type of character she is and how fun she is. Obviously the world of drinking, I'm sponsored by Partake Non-Alcoholic Beer now, and that's kind of been fun, putting people on that as they've been kind of journeying through their own journey for whatever reason, even whether it's health or whether it's alcohol problems, or whether it's like they just can't drink anymore for whatever reason. So that's been kind of fun. But the bars have certainly had to adjust here, and people with issues maybe through the COVID situation. Any kind of advice that you've been asked about, or been people coming to you personally and saying, hey, I can't go to the bar. I've got a problem. I'm trying to get alcohol out of my life. And I don't know, like, how are you guiding people right now?
Well, I mean, it's been really tough for people struggling with alcohol, the whole lockdown situation, because people who were already drinking a little bit too much, but still being able to keep a lid on it, have found that the additional stress, the additional loneliness, the additional the fear and anxiety has meant that they've been drinking more and more than they were before. So, in the UK, I know that the number of people who would classify as being sort of problem drinkers has doubled over the sort of, the lockdown period. So I think a lot of people are coming out of that sort of strict lockdown and reevaluating what's going on and start wondering what on earth to do about it. And what I say to everyone is you are not alone, and there is help out there, and actually there is fabulous help online. So the fact that it is more difficult to see people in real life doesn't mean that you can't find help. So yes, don't despair is my main message.
Well, a lot of people staying in now. Well, I mean, they're getting out, but they've been staying in mostly. So I could see where that could cause a problem for sure. But I can't thank you enough for what you did for me and what that book did for me. And I definitely encourage people to check it out. And I mean, do you write a Sober Diaries part 2? Do you write like a now I'm sober and it's like this is a different journey I'm on? And does that a book potential? Because I'd love to hear that story as well.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I think what when I wrote the Sober Diaries, my kids were between the ages of 6 and 11, and they're now between the ages of 11 and 16. And I don't think I can carry on writing about my life without causing them immense embarrassment.
Gotcha.
So I think I could write part 2 about what I'm up to now, but I think my kids would never forgive me. So I'm sorry.
So fiction is the way to go now.
Yeah. And my fiction is loosely related to my real life. I think fiction always is in one way, shape, or form. So
as part of the LifeCast question, I'm asking people to kind of sum up and finish up here. What's the life of Clare Pooley like right now?
It's an interesting question, because I found lockdown really hard. I found I found it difficult to see what was going on in the world, and not grieve for all the things that we've lost, even if temporarily. But coming out of it, I'm feeling really positive, because I'm hoping that we've all learned so much about the things that really matter, about the power of connection, about friends and family. I went out for dinner with a few friends a couple of nights ago, which sort of thing I used to do in the old days all the time. And and I really, really appreciated it. It was just sort of, I think it's made us realize what's important in life, and I hope we can all hang on to that.
Yeah. It's certainly changed the world, but it's certainly changed the way that we have spending our time right now, which is definitely more valuable than ever, but also I think people are being more productive. So I can't wait for the announcement of the new book, and whenever that's going to come out. Again, congratulations on the Sober Diaries and how well it's doing. The Authenticity Project in stores now everywhere, which everyone should pick up, which is amazing. Where can people find you online, Clare?
Well, my website is clarepooley.com. But I'm also on social media, so you can find me on Twitter at @cpooleywriter, and Facebook. My Facebook page is Sober Mummy, and on Instagram I'm Clare @Clare_Pooley.
Awesome. This is the life of Clare Pooley now since December. the part 2 of the Life Cast with Clare Pooley, part 2. This was great to have you on for a little brief catch up. Couldn't be happier for you, and all the best for the rest of 2020, and maybe we'll see you in 21 over there.
Oh, well, it's so good to see you, and I'm so glad you recovered from COVID. See, now you're a superhero. You have all those antibodies.
They tell me I've got the tiger blood, but we'll see. We'll see how that's going. So far, so good. Onwards and upwards, and I've had a great support system, great family, great wife, great kids, great everything. It's been amazing through the whole process, and my mom lives with us. She's been a big support. Everyone's been awesome, and away we go. Just on to the next page, right?
Yay.
Thanks, Clare.
Oh, thank you, Brent. So good to see you.
Talk in a bit.
Bye.